Hello everyone, my name is Eric. I'm a limited licensed master social worker and psychotherapist. I've been working with children, youth, and adults for 10 years. Our video today begins with a quote from Karen Horney's The Neurotic Personality of Our Time. Leaving aside the manifest picture and looking at the dynamics effective in producing neuroses, there is one essential factor common to all neuroses, and that is anxieties and the defenses built up against them. Intricate as the structure of neuroses may be, the anxiety is the motor which sets the neurotic process going and keeps it in motion. I have worked with many people over the course of my career, and as it happens, my caseload is made up of primarily men. I typically also work with older women, but what we're going to be talking about today seems specifically to be a men's issue, if we are to put it that way. The denial of anxiety that I see from young men especially is kind of crazy. I have to believe that the denial of anxiety lies in our culture's individualistic, pull yourself up by the bootstraps masculine attitude, but then again, I can't exactly place it fully at the feet of culture either. Defenses against anxiety are just as adaptive and evolutionary as anxiety itself. So it's confusing to me why I have men showing up into my office and then denying that there's anything wrong. I ask them if they're anxious or if they feel like they have anxiety, and some of them legitimately tell me no. Of course, it's not exactly my job to convince someone that they have anxiety, but I often find myself beating around the bush with a lot of men because, well, it's obvious to me that they have anxiety, and they just either don't have the words to describe it, or they straight up deny it for some reason. Ultimately, this video is going to be about the denial of anxiety in a population of young men. My audience may not exactly be part of this population, but I still wanted to make a video on it because I think that it's an important topic to talk about. Since YouTube is popular among young men, like myself, maybe this video will come across someone's algorithm, and maybe it'll start up a conversation, or at the very least get people thinking. With that being said, let's start with a clinical vignette. A 26-year-old male comes to me seeking help with a pornography addiction and compulsive masturbation. He says that he watches pornography upwards of 2 hours a day, whenever he can, especially whenever he's bored. When he's at home, he masturbates whenever he watches porn, sometimes multiple times per day. He has a significant other whom he lives with, and they seem very understanding of each other and the issue. He refers to his pornography use as an addiction, and he links this addictive behavior to childhood through his previous addiction to candy, in which he also hid his candy wrappers from his parents so that they wouldn't find them. I inquired about his feelings about guilt and shame for doing this. Nothing really there, or at least so he says. So we moved on. When I noticed his leg bouncing up and down, I commented on this. I said, "I notice your leg is bouncing up and down. Is there something you're anxious about?" "Not really. I'm not really an anxious person," he said. "Not really" is different than "no," and your leg says otherwise. We both laughed a bit, and then I said something that seemed to cut down his defenses. "It would be hard for me to believe that you're the sole person on this earth who doesn't have anxiety. Anxiety is an adaptive and evolutionary mechanism that keeps us safe. You do have anxiety. You just either don't notice it, or you do a really good job at covering it up." It has long been known that compulsive masturbation may be provoked by anxiety, but the same holds true for all sorts of sexual relations. Persons for whom sexual activities serve predominantly as a means of allaying anxiety will become extremely restless if they have no chance for sexual satisfaction, even for a short time. This man has an incredible amount of anxiety, and it comes out in every sentence he speaks to me. Whether it's about his procrastination and reluctance to get back into the workforce, or his fears of fucking up the job that could cost him his career, or worse, his life, or his personal insecurities, and yet, if you ask him if he has anxiety, he will straight up tell you no. Why? Well, again, I think it has to do with our concept of masculinity in our culture. To deny anxiety is to give yourself some power over it. As we discussed in the previous videos about defense mechanisms, denial is a very common primary psychological defense against anxiety. Simply put, Denying anxiety is something men do because having anxiety makes us feel weak. Not that that's my perspective, of course. I don't believe anxiety makes us weak. But the traditional Western idea of how a man should be almost requires us to put on our thinking caps and ignore how we feel so that we can stand stoically in the face of adversity, like a knight in shining armor. But the trouble is that denying anxiety doesn't actually help us manage it, or get rid of it, or use it constructively. It just makes it so that it operates in the background and generally runs our lives by driving our decision-making and behavior. Anxiety is a fundamental pillar of existential philosophy and psychotherapy. It's a fundamental mechanism in adaptation and evolution, and so I simply do not believe when a man sits down across from me in treatment and tells me he has no anxiety. I generally begin to think of all of the ways he must be keeping it out of his awareness. I told this young man a story of my anxiety, and it went a little something like this. My life growing up was incredibly easy. My parents took care of me. Yeah, they fought every now and then, but they were always there if I needed them. My father wasn't the most affectionate or supportive person, but we never had a bad relationship. My mother was great, and I had a good relationship with her and my sister too. My parents came close to divorce, but decided that staying together for the kids was the best option. My high school years were full of fun and friends and mischief. I genuinely don't think I knew what anxiety felt like until I was about 30 years old. Now, that's not to say that I didn't have anxiety. I started drinking alcohol and smoking weed at 16. For the better part of my 20s, I was a serious alcoholic. It wasn't until I decided to get sober that I realized, holy shit, I have a lot of anxiety. The purpose of the story was to demonstrate how my own compulsive, borderline addictive behavior and my alcohol and cannabis consumption masked my anxiety for the better part of 15 years. It's not that I was never anxious or didn't have anxiety. I just resorted to getting drunk and high every time I felt bored, sad, frustrated, hopeless, scared, or any other feeling that becomes activated by anxiety. I guess that's an important thing to understand about anxiety. It's not just a singular emotion. It is the root of every negative emotion, just like it's involved in every neurosis. When we feel bored, we are anxious about having nothing enjoyable to do, so we go seek something else out that occupies our time and mind. When we feel sad, we actually get anxious about loss, shame, and guilt. You can almost think of any typical negative emotion as a response to an initial anxiety. If you don't believe me, just think about it. If you're depressed, you're also anxious that you may have done something wrong in this life, or that you may be responsible for how you're feeling, or that it could get worse. If you're angry, you're likely anxious and defensive about a real or perceived slight against your character or someone disrespecting you. Anxiety is at the root of almost every negative emotion. I challenge you to come up with a negative emotion that is not initiated by anxiety in some way. All of this is to say that there is really no point in denying our anxiety anymore, especially young men. It makes it so much more difficult to understand what's going on with us when we don't have the key to the mystery. Understanding that almost all of your neurotic behaviors and patterns are the result of underlying anxiety is the key to unlocking that mystery and your potential. Having anxiety and admitting to it is not a weakness. It is as normal as admitting that you have joy and happiness sometimes. These emotions are not inherently shameful or embarrassing, good or bad, right or wrong. Your culture and your own superego imbue these emotions with moral power that makes admitting anxiety harder than it needs to be. But rest assured that that is an illusion. You are not a hero by denying your anxiety. In fact, many of our history's heroes did the opposite. They faced their anxieties head on, and the only way that they could do that was to first admit that they were real. Let's make this all a little bit easier for ourselves and accept the fact that anxiety is a normal part of life and that to deny it is actually more neurotic than it is to just admit it. Maybe this video isn't for you. Probably most people who watch this already know they have anxiety, or how ridiculous it is to deny it, but I know there are plenty of men out there who struggle hard against coming to the realization that they are in fact anxious. I want to change that through acceptance and understanding. This video was a significant departure away from my normally planned topics and videos, but I was inspired to make it because I think that in the wake of all of these online coaches that will help you overcome anxiety or tell you that you don't have anxiety and instead you have some other mysterious third thing, it's better to not fall for the trap. Save your money or at least put it to better use and get actual psychotherapy for your anxiety. Help is available. Thank you for your support. Until next time.